scares us? When I ask this question to you, I want you to think about what you have seen, what you know, what you believe. For more often than not, it is the source for everything you become afraid of. Whether through fabricated myths to physical encounters, the human species has experienced many forms of our own fear through history, and in our art, it's expressed outwards. This is a showcase of that spectrum, and how the medium of cinema portrays not just the external monsters, but our internal demons, that, whether we know it or not, has always been with us, in one form or another. When it comes to the physical manifestation of what we fear, the monsters we know to be in our world immediately can signal feelings of danger and how we have become placed in the status of prey, even with those creatures that used to be in our world.
Where's the goat?
Leave it to the magic of science fiction to find ways to showcase the premises of species we thought had gone extinct be brought back into its necromantic state of terror.
Boy, do I hate being right all the time.
In Jurassic Park, the high concept of a theme park advertising genetically made dinosaurs while having its moments of Spielbergian awe and wonder that comes with first seeing these humongous beasts being brought back before our very eyes. It's equally, if not more so, wanting to spread a harsh critique and warning for such matters in altering the natural state.
You wouldn't have anything to say.
No, hold on. This isn't some species that was obliterated by deforestation or the building of a dam. Dinosaurs had their shot, and nature selected them for extinction.
I simply don't understand this Luddite attitude, especially from a scientist.
The film transforms its magical adventure into one of a horror film, where our protagonist we've become familiar with suddenly must face life and death means, and at some points, it's utterly terrifying. Yet its journey through all its effective scenes of tension is still a film that has that euphoric feeling of hope in its climax, that we can conquer our fears after all we've been through. Of course, Steven Spielberg is no stranger to capturing the horror of creatures, even when it's from a more grounded setting, like in Jaws, where its titular shark is treated nearly in the same breath of a supernatural force of nature. With its innovative use of POV shots and constantly using techniques to keep its creature unseen, the film transforms what even in a less fantastical setting into something that captures a physical terror, the likes of which we barely see. And this has been a staple of much of genre cinema for decades. You've created creatures that, while at first seem scary, become symbols for compassion and an animalistic need to survive, like King Kong. Yet at the same time comes Japan's answer with a creature that simply is the force of evil. Godzilla, a monster that represents the dangers of nuclear creation of post-war war, results in that creation leading to our very destruction. Most genre works of fiction have within them an awareness that has been in our world for centuries. the history of many mistakes, dangers, and atrocities we are capable of. The central xenomorph in Alien is designed to be the ultimate horrific creature. Designed by H.R. Giger, its references of sexual orientation and violent psychology expressed with external visuals the horrors of what is unknown. Yet its real horror lies in how that thing can affect everything we are familiar with. Fear through horror and creature features can elicit many reactions, one of which can be that of strong and unique kind of disgust that is rarely put into words. David Cronenberg's entire filmography explores the uncomfortable sides of our very being through genre filmmaking. Perhaps his most seminal work would be that of his 1983 film, Videodrome.
The television screen has become the retina of the mind's eye.
Yes.
That's why I refuse to appear on television, except on television. Of course, Oblivion is not the name I was born with. That's my television name. Soon, all of us will have special names. Names designed to cause the cathode ray tube to resonate.
Here, Cronenberg mixes commentary on media consumption, violence, and the very pleasure of one's own body into one disturbing, often disgusting portrait that is unknowingly able to also express the beauty of such a world, even when we don't want to see such things. Because to express discomfort is what we all inevitably must face, especially in the arts that aim to transgress and comment on the very topics that loom over our lives. In 1973, when the phenomenon known as The Exorcist came out, it still is, to this day, a film whose horrific imagery of demonic sadism will never be topped just in its scale of influence in making everyone completely terrified. And for good reason. Friedkin's presentation of the source of evil is completely crude and gross. It's everything we find so repugnant in someone's soul externalized for all to see.
Be gone! In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit!
This impact on the mainstream would go on to be an influence for many films of the sort into the contemporary age, as the same could be applied for Hong-jin's The Wailing, an uneasy depiction of paranoia in a small South Korean town, where our policeman protagonist must come face to face with that which is so difficult to comprehend. Even before The Exorcist, all of them can go back with Häxan in 1922, its portrayal of the devil being the epitome of degeneracy, sadism, and ugliness. Its portrayal of witchcraft with its striking imagery is a signal and means to hone in what all evil is to much of religion and of our universal symbols in our cultures. All we must do when it comes to this film is to face them.
I think what you want to do to Bob is
Inhuman? So what you're doing must be human.
Because the extremity that emerges from the cinema screen can be a strong advantage in the realm of aesthetics, to visually convey exactly the feelings that are specific in certain areas and on the cinema screen, made immortal. The portrayal of all that is disgusting, in a vile and broken marriage comes to its apex of physical violence in Andrej Zuławski's Possession. Blending genres of melodrama with Cronenberg-esque body horror, the film is a relentless exercise in its specific aesthetic, stylized yet with locations that feel bare, acting that is over the top yet simultaneously nuanced. Nothing in the film is meant to be a comfortable watch, as it speaks to provoke through its medium some of the most challenging questions that comes with the adult life that we all must face sooner or later.
Well, that's why I'm with you. Because you say I for me.
And yet, for that need of aesthetic, there is the choice of pushing further and further and further. Who knows what that might look like, with all the filth and grime that comes with everything that is sinister. There are many examples, but one that I wish to highlight comes from the one-of-a-kind animated film, Mad God. In a full-circle moment, this film is directed by Phill Tippett, one of the famed visual effects artists who helped bring Spielberg's dinosaurs to life using stop motion. Almost 30 years afterwards, Tippett would figuratively and literally delve into the pits of hell that explore what true evil can look like, and in hell, only go downwards and downwards until you reach the bottom. But not all threats are immediately recognized. Some decide to hide away in mystery, even more so to be the complete opposite of a physical threat and taking the form of something more ethereal. This is where we see the tales of ghosts influencing the material world in differing ways. In The Shining, the presences of the Overlook Hotel mainly exist to persuade Jack Torrance's worst traits to be much more pronounced, to the point where he would physically go and murder his family, transforming his mental state into an almost cartoonish manner.
A little slow tonight, isn't it?
Whereas in The Innocents, Jack Clayton's adaptation of The Turn of the Screw sees the subjectivity of our protagonist be brought to the forefront, as the caretaker of two children starts to question whether or not the ones that are supposedly humanity at its most innocent state can harness such evil without us even knowing. The film on the whole wisely chooses not to be absolute. Its gothic aesthetic and mixture of moments with relief and tension lead to a film that decides that this world that we see here can never be fully understood. For in this visual medium of the motion picture, while some choose to replicate reality, others try to distort it, leaving its perspective of something elusive and strange. Thus, the filmmaking masters of this approach really lean into that sense of freedom, even when it creates an unnerving feeling. Federico Fellini is perhaps the most famous name when it comes to portraying reality in said vein, so much so that the very idea of the Fellini-esque already assorts a very specific vision of carnival-like sequences with arrays of colorful characters that practically are designed as live-action cartoons straight from a coloring book, usually for comedic effect. So when he applies that same methodology to a horror film, he is able to portray a very different yet consistent through line of his specific aesthetic.
Lei si ritiene un nevrotico?
It's my only quality.
Cosa c'è che non va nella sua vita, signor Dammit?
Nothing. I'm desperately happy.
In Toby Dammit, the titular actor character, like a few other Fellini protagonists, wanders through a warped vision of the eternal city, a collage of characters and sounds filling the screen, all the while in his mind the thoughts of the devil appear in the form of a little girl, never directly encountered, but always an inch away from you.
She seemed to know that sooner or later I would join in her game. But when? But you promised to leave me alone.
Indeed, much of Fellini's later works delve deeper into this idiosyncrasy. When we watch his Roma or Casanova, our gut instincts may be to be off-putted or even just freaked out at just how unorthodox or strange these characters and places are. Just in the world of Fellini, it all is just what it is. Sometimes dark, sometimes dreamlike, but always with a strong conviction. And speaking of dreams, the place where we all eventually wind up in our subconscious is facing those parts of ourselves in our visage of life that will always find a way to make us uncomfortable. Returning once more to Stanley Kubrick, his swan song, Eyes Wide Shut, deals with the aspect of desire related to dreams in a pure Freudian perspective. The look of the film blends the line between dream and reality, and all the while, Bill Harford finds himself on his journey that, dream or not, sinks him deeper into what perhaps are his most repressed desires as he enters the masked ball. A world where identity is hidden, occult rituals, and cruel punishment reign supreme. We may not be sure if a place like it exists, but we never do forget it.
What is going to happen to that woman?
No one can change her fate now. When a promise has been made here, there is no turning back. Go!
Much of our coming-of-age period is laced with several memories of first seeing that which we are confused and cannot explain why. Only that in our gut reactions, we usually feel immense fear or stress from those experiences. Much has been said by many about the pieces of media that has scared us as children, which have proven to be formidable parts of us growing up. From my personal experience, I can vividly remember when I first watched The Secret of Nim as a very young boy, and being completely spellbound, yet unsettled by the world that was showcased in front of me. A world with innocence mixed with ghoulish terror lurking around every corner. This kind of magical but eerie settings would lead me to watch even more challenging fantasy worlds like Angel's Egg by Mamoru Oshii, or the Japanese folk stories of Kobayashi's Gaidan, an anthology of 4 stories all about the supernatural threats to plague the very real events that happen to several individuals, all of which come into mind the very real desires and fears and anxieties that one must have eventually.
私はもうあなたに危害は加えません。だけど、もし今夜あんたが見たことを誰かに告げたら、たとえお母さんにでも言うなら、私にわかるよ。その時はお前を殺す。
As we have discussed so far, the cinematic medium can express the darkest parts of ourselves in a more vivid depiction. Stylization can be used to exaggerate, but sometimes it just shows things bluntly and more vividly. In Almodovar's The Skin I Live In, Antonio Banderas plays an enigmatic plastic surgeon whose methods we slowly see are that of a borderline madman, where his fixation on his main subject becomes less of an actual care and more of a stranglehold onto her. Almodovar transforms his usual trademark Art Deco style of vivid colors and muters it to convey more of the darkness that has been here now and where it all came from.
No parecía un ser humano. Era una babisa. De un grito que se oyó en toda la casa y se arrojó al vacío.
Of course, this need of control is not just from the individual, as it can lead into a full societal scale as well. Authoritarians, totalitarians, dictators, and the like have appeared in our own world many times. Thus, with the dystopian genre in particular, the systems of absolute repression are taken to the extreme. George Orwell, through his iconic novel 1984, showed the most influential depiction of how we see a dystopian world in fiction, where the process of newspeak and complete surveillance in our lives is portrayed in its most oppressive state.
As we all know, the biological and social stimulation of the family leads to private reflection outside party needs, and to the establishment of unorthodox loyalties which can only lead to thought crime. But the introduction of artsem, combined with the neutralization of the orgasm, will effectively render obsolete the family until it becomes impossible to conceptualize.
But we always must remember that this dystopian world from one's imagination always comes from the perception one has of our own reality. And as several films can show us, even our own history can be distorted, even during Orwell's time in World War II. After all, one filmmaker would call showing the lives of the oppressors in Auschwitz as the Big Brother in the Nazi house. Jonathan Glazer's The Zone of Interest presents history through his lens as incredibly detached, with barely any close-ups on figures in its highly desaturated color palette. The film wants to make it even more apparent of the atrocities that can always happen, even behind the veneer of a calm, middle-class-esque world, thus making said atrocities, in turn, all the more frightening. They say how cinema is mainly a form of mostly showing and restrict use of telling, but sometimes, to hone in on the most disturbing concepts, you don't even need to show them on screen, but rather an abstraction of what we are looking that can show and say the most. A scene that demonstrates this in Nickel Boys is where Turner is beaten relentlessly in the middle of the night, and all we are shown to express this horrid action is this.
Don't make a sound. Get more.
Sometimes all it takes is an approach like this to express the most horrifying subjects in a mature fashion without the need for exploitation. But in other times, there comes a point of simply showing the act for what it is. Once Upon a Time in America shows Noodle's hedonistic obsession of his childhood love Deborah reach its most horrific point as he forcefully puts himself onto her. Leone here shows us without any need for stylization within a scene and just showing a violent act for what it is. All that is needed is just to show something horrifying that we know to be so true. But for an even more extreme example, Angelopoulos' approach to a similar scene in Landscape in the Mist combines the bluntness with the abstract. With Angelopoulos, his trademark long and slow camera movements are used here to heighten the tension of what we don't see inside that truck. Thus, once the shot reaches its climax, the reveal is all the more harrowing, and all we are left with is to ponder what exactly we have just seen. For to be scared by something doesn't just mean a jolt of fear that immediately gets us filled with an excitement. The horror of life with what we know is in our world can just linger and just exist. Thus we have scenes like those in Roy Andersson's Living trilogy, where we have a sacrificial element of a girl falling to her death, or a vivid symbol of the exploration of the enslavement of Africans throughout all of Europe's history. These scenes and more portray life just as it is to express how horrible our lives can be, without any need to explain more or less. Yet as I said, even in a domestic setting, the simple ways of violent abusive acts being shown is enough to signal how scary a life can be. Such is the case for the Castle of Purity. Here, Arturo Ripstein tells a story based off a real event in Mexico of a father who practically imprisoned his entire family for almost 2 decades by making them believe the outside world is too dangerous. What results in this premise is the familial patriarch becoming less of a loving figure and more of a dictator who imposes his power onto everyone he knows.
¿Cuántos habitantes habrá en el año 2000?
7,000 millones.
Muy bien. ¿Cuántos niños mueren de hambre anualmente?
3,5 millones.
Mientras más gente haya, habrá más crímenes y más vicio.
The same can also be found in Michael Haneke's masterpiece The White Ribbon, where the relations between parent and child is a repressive world where all the children can do is to be treated with violence, and how our parental figures can be transformed into these cold yet grotesque monsters.
Misch dich nicht ein, lass mich in Ruhe, ich muss noch mal rüber zum Baron.
Because for some growing up, the only monsters they know are not the supernatural creatures that bump in the night, but those who are supposed to be the closest to you, the ones who are always directly visible for everyone to see. Sometimes those in plain sight that have an ordinary quality to them end up being the most terrifying creatures. Utopia, directed by Sohrab Sahid Salis, presents us with a world at its most repressive and unsaintly. A world run by a pimp with his collection of hired prostitutes. Here, Heinz, played by Manfred Zapatka, is a man of 2 sides, one outdoors and one indoors. And it is what happens indoors that a nightmarish environment comes to be for all who are victims to it, and there's nothing they can do to ever escape this nightmare.
Wenn ich mal seine Hand genommen hatte, ist sie ganz schnell weggezogen. Sogar in die Tasche gesteckt hat er sie. Dabei hat er mich so komisch angeguckt. Verdammt. Verdammt nochmal! Wenn mir das damals einer gesagt hätte, mir fort. Der hat ja nur daran gedacht. Nur daran.
But then there is the question of what happens when everything that is horrifying is simply accepted as normalcy from the start. What truly is a happy life? These are the questions asked in Agnisvada's Le Bonnet. The film is a Trojan horse of sorts, featuring beautiful cinematography of lush colors and shots of the stunning natural world we see. But yet, this picturesque world never changes. There is no rug pulled beneath us. We simply see exactly the world as it is, or at least the way our protagonist sees it. A husband who seemingly out of the blue falls in love with another woman unbeknownst to his own wife, and as we the audience slowly figure out the mundanity of this betrayal, the end result leads to something so disturbing about how valid "till death do us part" actually is.
Nous, on ne se verra pas souvent.
C'est vrai, mais quand on se voit, c'est bien. Et après, on peut y penser. On est ensemble.
Once again, cinema brings in the discussion of logistics and fabrication of our environment being twisted, and always never being what you would expect of it. Ari Aster, with his 2023 film Beau is Afraid, attempts an extravagant Kafka-inspired adventure into the mind of someone whose anxieties are turned up to 11. The titular character, played by Joaquin Phoenix, journeys through these sequences of tableaus that as they go along, and as we stay along with him, the more its oddities and uncomfortable natures creep under our skin, as much as it does have the potential for being gut-bustingly hilarious.
20 now.
Oh my God.
20.
I know.
Don't curse me, my friend. I'm not the one.
Oh my God.
5 more now.
I'll call the police.
Pulse, directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa, however, only presents an atmosphere of dread with this world of screens and the isolation of those from one another. Its use of horror is very different from most of the genre by leaning way more into the ambiguity of everything we see, tying into the film's thesis of how, in the digital age, not only has this change in our form of communication, but also how our own perception of our surroundings changes as well. It calls to mind the almost prophetic nature of the anime Serial Experiments Lain. Here, the series presents how a full embrace of the simulacra of the internet transforms in the mind of someone non-recognizable. Much like in Pulse, the atmosphere of the film becomes an alienating place, as we no longer know and can't decide what's real and what isn't. While these techno-horrors may present a source for these problems, it is an entirely different conversation when entering an entirely different, opaque realm where nothing is fully grounded in an understandable sense. David Lynch was an artist who sought to fully visualize the unconscious mind, a mind so vivid in its depictions, and what they were was simply a delve into the uncanny. A film like Blue Velvet, when it does delve into the underworld led by Frank Booth, demonstrates how so much of what we find to be true evil is still such an enigma to most of us that we will never fully comprehend it.
Let's fuck! I'll fuck anything that moves!
Because Lynch films are not made with an intellectual background. They're not puzzles meant to be solved. They simply exist and are meant to be felt deeply, even when those feelings that are meant to be felt are of complete discomfort and fear.
I'd let him do anything.
I believe there is validity in simply showing what you find to be so uncanny and even demented from your own imagination. Thus, the art becomes less about structure and more about expression. Films from underground artists and the experimental can delve deeply into these subconscious fears and discuss them openly. Again, even if we can't fully dissect it. But what fear and art can do at the end of the day is have it be a comforting thing, where instead of hiding from our demons, we face them head on. A result of something like this, we only need look to the filmography of Ingmar Bergman. While his filmography is known for its philosophical questions on the nature of life, violence, and of the self, what that can usually result in from a visual standpoint is imagery that seeks to challenge the preconceived notions of what cinema is meant to be. For me, the best example of Bergman's confrontation with that we don't want to see comes in Cries and Whispers. Here, the story of a dying woman who is surrounded by her family allows us to witness in full detail the agony of such experiences, which, to be honest, in execution, it's one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen in cinema. In its mise-en-scène of rooms the color of blood crimson and the use of close-ups on faces to show all expressions makes this feel like something so claustrophobic that all we can do is just linger with it. Some may call this film a ghost story. Some may call this a straight-up horror film. There are elements to this, but more than anything, Bergman in his oeuvre wants to confront the human condition through his filmmaking, even if we are so scared by it. As I have said all the way back into the beginning, art can reflect us right now, and in cinema, to see in all its clarity with the image the most frightening things there are in life, because it has always been there. Fear has always been here. Fear can lead to anger. Anger can lead to hate. Hate can lead to suffering to many. And all of this is a part of our lives, which means it might be never ending, but all we can do in the meantime is to face it head on. Maybe then we'll be a little less scared day by day.